Buckle up, everyone, and welcome to Carpool Rugby League, a show where three Rugby League tragics are talking everything Rugby League on your way to or from work. I'm Graham.
I'm Shano.
And I'm the chameleon.
Welcome aboard and on with the show. Yes, it's Tuesday. You know what that means. It means we've got another episode of Carpool Rugby League coming your way. And boys, we're revving up the engine. We are well and truly cruising along the road to the finals, heading into round 24 this week. So we'll talk about the NRL this week, round 24, where all the teams are sitting, and we'll give you a bit of an up-to-date view of whose final chances are still alive and who can start booking the trip to Bali for Mad Monday. We've got NRLW, not only the scores, but big news from the judiciary tonight. And yeah, plenty going on, Shano.
Yeah. Oh, heaps. It's funny that, Panthers juggernaut just keeps going. Like earlier this year we wondered, and they've just answered everything about how professional they are. Warriors surprise packet of the NRL. They just seem to be hanging around that top four still. And what must be said, I think, we can talk about certain teams, but the inability of South Sydney last week to ice anything just really it's just really thrown the cat amongst the pigeons. I think that we're going to see at the back end of this season some massive jostling for 5, 6, 7, 8, and I think that it's going to be a very, very interesting fight for those positions. I think that Panthers and Broncos are just in a world of their own at the moment. The Storm, interestingly, with the Raiders having won 12 games, it's coming to the pointy end of the season, and I think there's certain teams who we didn't think are going very well, and other teams who we thought by now would be really humming along, hitting their straps, really struggling.
Yeah, and as you said there, Shano, I mean, I'm sure Griffo, you'll be happy to see that the Panthers are flying high. Starting to see a bit of a gap with the Panthers and Broncos both on 36. Broncos still have a bye in hand, but they're just sort of starting to pull away. Are you starting to feel as though it'll be tough for any team other than the Broncos and Panthers, given current form, to win this premiership?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say it's a two-horse race.
It's a horse and a cat.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, there's only one horse involved, but
I stole your stick. Sorry,
yeah,
mate.
That's okay. That's all good. It's all good. Currently, it looks that way, but watch enough rugby league over the years to know that anything can happen on a given day. I mean,
yeah.
I can't quite lock in those two teams as the top two yet, because both of those sides have some tough opponents. The Warriors probably, I think, realistically, are the only threat to join one of those top two teams.
Amazing.
But they've got to. It is a little bit.
It
but
is.
They're going to have to. Yeah, they're going to have to improve their for and against. But if it were that they joined them, it would mean that one of those teams has lost games. So Penrith's massive for and against so far better than any other side. More than 100 better than the next best team. That's amazing in itself. But the Broncos, if they were to falter, and I don't think they will, probably that's the more likely scenario for the Warriors. But I just don't see it happening. I can't see the Broncos dropping and they've still got a bye as well. So it looks like the top two are almost locked in. I say the Warriors are pretty much a lock for the top four, and then I guess the battle is on. And I think the two teams may play this week: the Storm v the Raiders. That's a huge game. Winner of that likely to make the top four as well. A few weeks ago, we sort of thought it was a race in 9 for the top 8, and I'm very pleased to say that it's maybe a race in 12, given that team number 8 is on 26 points, team number 12 is on 24 points. Like looking at that just in numbers, you say it's wide open. The draw will have a bit of influence, but when we say the draw, there've been teams that we thought were pretty much giving them a win, and they didn't actually collect on that win. So obviously, I thought, as we all did, that the Rabbitohs would have dusted the Sharks last week, and it didn't happen. So as a rugby league fan, it's great that there is still this. We go down, hopefully, all the way to the last week with a host of teams still with a realistic chance. I want to shout out to the Newcastle Knights, who I saw them beaten by a reserve grade Penrith team, basically, and I thought they were horrible. They've not lost a game since that day.
Is that 5 in a row now? 5,
something
6?
like that.
Yeah.
Congratulations to their players, to their coaching staff. They've actually now got a better record than 50%. They're 10-1-9, and they've got the Bulldogs this week. So you would think that they will stay in the top 8 for at least another week. But the Roosters, who I think we basically wrote them off last week. They're still there.
Yep.
They're only 2 points out of the 8, but they do have this horrendous for and against, which might bite them in the tail. And they've got some tough games. I do believe that they'll win this week. Wouldn't it be great if it goes down around 27 and I guess you want to
for the neutrals, possibly not for my blood
knockout game against the arch enemy.
I'm with you, Griffo. I think that by around 27, I think we're actually not going to know what the table's going to look like. I think things are going to come down to the wire on both ends. Like some of the games, like if you look at round 26, 2 cracking games could be Panthers Eels on the Thursday night. The Raiders play the Broncos that week. Fast forward, Thursday night, Broncos v Storm. That sets up Panthers Cowboys. If the Cowboys need to win that, you could see the Panthers needing to win for the Shield, or Cowboys maybe needing to win to get in the 8. Like these games are just insane. This is absolutely built for anybody to go anywhere. And when you look at some of the opposition and some of the teams and who has buys, that Parramatta have a bye last round, South Sydney bye second last round. Whilst you get 2 points, you don't get any for and against. So yes, it's a win, but it's basically a 0-0 win. And you know what?
True.
For and against looking like it might come down to something here. And fast forward, depending on what the Knights do this week, and we'll talk about them playing the Bulldogs. They've then got South Sydney, and you know what? South Sydney haven't really thrilled me to bits, but that's probably a rant that's going to be in about an hour and a bit's time.
All right.
We might have to be liberal with the 2-minute tip, I feel like, when we get to the Rabbitohs game. But yeah, some interesting things there, as we said.
I've covered my computer in plastic in case I'm frothing at the mouth.
Yeah,
I think the last time he gave South a rant
They come
turned that
back. That's
season
what
around last year.
I'm working on
Last year.
superstition here, Griff. You betcha.
Yeah.
One of our great listeners, Steve-O, Panther Steve, formerly Magpie Steve, he said South need a Shano rant to get their season back on track.
There we
So
are.
maybe it might come.
Well,
Oh yeah, kickstart my heart. Yeah.
Whoa, yeah, for sure. But yeah, very interesting there. And as we said, the only other thing, I suppose, implication for the Roosters, as you alluded to, Rabbitohs, Eels, Cowboys, those teams all have a bite in hand. But you make a good point there, because say, for example, one of these other teams has a bye like the Cowboys and the Roosters are behind them, and the Roosters win this week, it's... You know what I mean? Like you said, both teams are getting 2 points, and the Roosters are chipping away at that for and against. So, not all gone for the Roosters. Griffo and I alluded to it the other week that there are games where teams will be taking points off each other. We saw that the other night with the Sharks beating the Rabbitohs. So there's some really intriguing matchups. Just one thing I wanted to add on to what you were saying, Griffo, with the Warriors. I actually think they've probably got one of the better runs home. So
They do.
I think that they're probably out of the team other than Panthers and Broncos, one of the better chances to cement a spot in the 4. So
lock them in for the top 4.
Yeah. So, but plenty of footy to be played. Still plenty of points up for grabs. There's also one of these rounds, when we get to it, I may forget to mention it, so I'm going to say it now. For those who haven't used their Joker yet, and I'm not sure if you
I haven't.
I think you might be tempted this week. I'm not saying it's an easy one to pick, but I'm just saying I think a lot of people will be tempted.
I've not really looked at the games as such, and I'm looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, so keep that in mind when we get there a little bit later on. Obviously, we've got a lot of our regular segments to get through. And having Shano on board early, this gives us an opportunity to head on over and see what's been happening in the world of rugby league with Shano's Tidbits.
He's got the news. You need a fix. It's time for Shano's Tidbits.
Yes, well, thank you, Graham. Look, just a couple of things, really. I think everything I want to discuss is going to get picked up in the team news. Don't want to double up on anything. Sam Burgess, he's leaving South Sydney. He's taking the Warrington job. Interestingly, he's spoken quite candidly about him wanting to come back and become an NRL coach. So it'd be very interesting to see what the next couple of years brings him at Warrington. And we know that generally for coaches, it's a fairly good apprenticeship going to England, doing coaching. We've had many coaches do that, come back and win a premiership. So some also not, but it seems like whether it's assistant coaching or coaching, head coaching, to go over there and cut your teeth is something. So that's probably bigger news for South as well. In some ways, he's cemented that, but it also means that their South Sydney coaching staff will have a change. Just one other thing I want to talk about, and I just want to talk about this thing that's been going around for the last few weeks, and we would have seen the NRL logo covered up and whatnot, and the Players Association and the players. And I think there's been a lot of mixed media around this. I find it quite... The first thing, I actually today had to eat a bit of humble pie, because what I thought this was all about I wasn't exactly 100% correct. I basically have been very vocal on the stupidity of covering up the NRL logo, purely because there's one other on the jersey and one on the shorts doesn't get covered up. So just covering up the one on the chest just seems stupid to me. In doing so, you're covering up the Telstra logo. Telstra are a major sponsor of the NRL. That's how you get money. they're not talking to the media, Channel 9 and Fox. Again, that's their main avenue to get money. And here I am thinking it's about money. It's actually about a collective bargaining agreement. And Clint Newton was on ABC today, and he spoke about how the Matildas did it a few years ago, where they just sat in the airport. Don't know if you remember or not. And the dialogue that now exists between Football Australia and the players of the Matildas, same with cricket way back when. I thought to myself, I think they make a really good point, is that there is this lack of dialogue between players and the NRL. I find it very interesting that the NRL, if tomorrow click their fingers and say we're going to have a 30-round competition, it just happens, and we're asking our players to suck it up. If they said you have to travel here, there, and everywhere, you've just got to suck it up. And I think in some ways I do feel for the footy players. When it comes down to money, I have this issue where the average rugby league player will earn over $3 million in 10 years. Now, if you're on the basic wage, that far, you're talking about 35 years of work. So I think it was really good that it was wound back and not talked about money. It's actually talking about standards for the players, ways in which we can protect players, both past, present, and future, and sort of, I suppose, build a league where there's this mutual respect and trust between players and the league itself. And it got me thinking, we're so happy to sort of sit on the sidelines and watch our team play, and whether we love what they produce or not, we can have our, as members, I suppose that's our vocal right, but to do it respectfully, of course. But I think also to say that, maybe our competition does have enough games. Maybe we need to start looking at, what the players are doing in this, and also looking at, for far too long, we've often said, for example, why not have a standalone origin? Oh, because of the ratings. And I think it's interesting that that's the first default. And if we said, what would a standalone weekend do for the players playing? And in a world where we're seeing injuries and different styles of play, I don't know if Clint Newton did a good job of hitting the nail on the head, and I'm probably not doing a great job of it either here. But I think what we're starting to find is we've got to come up with a system that actually protects the players for the length of time they play. What they earn. That's not what this is about. This is about protecting the players, and it's about saying, you know what? We've got to start finding ways to ensure that they're kept safe and ensure that their legacy continues. And I know it's all about revenue, but there's a part of me that says, surely the product doesn't have the fragility that if we only played one game in a week, it wouldn't all fall apart. So I think the question here for us as fans is, we've got the players who want this collective bargaining agreement. We've got the NRL who really aren't sure about it. I know they met with Peter V'landys today with absolutely, I haven't heard any outcome of what happened today. That was happening at 11 o'clock. It could have been postponed for all I know. I couldn't find any information on it. But I think what the question I want to ask you guys, question without notice, by the way, to our listeners. As fans, are we at the point where we have to start saying this is probably a good thing for our players, and we probably shouldn't be expecting any more of what they give? The season's long enough. We can't have any more games. It's probably time we start thinking about standalone weekends, not necessarily because that's what we want to do as far as football goes, but because when you look at the elite players in our game and the amount of football they play, most of them are going to play finals. Most of them are going to play Origin. Are we at the point where we've got to start saying, you know what, standalone weekend is not just about it's not just about putting it on a weekend or putting it on a time where everyone can go, but it's also about protecting those elite players of our game. What's your thoughts?
I totally
Well, I'm in
agree.
favour of standalone. I'd have the Origin in a 3-week period.
Yeah.
Pick a squad of, 25, 26, whatever you want, and don't interrupt the integrity of the actual NRL competition, because it's been we saw teams like Souths and Para fielding, near on reserve grade sides getting beaten by the bottom teams, and it's biting them in the ass right now. Look at where they are on the ladder, and they would have won those games. I'm yeah, your bread and butter is your NRL competition. That's your elite competition, and you don't put out the elite players. You take them out. They miss 3 games because of they're playing for their state. Now, it's a great honor, yes, but the clubs pay them their salary. There is a salary cap, and they're paying players to play, but not to play. Basically, they're missing games. I hear what Shano's saying there, and it makes a lot of sense. The flip side is that they are able to earn the income they earn and projected to earn over the next few years because 2 media organizations pump a huge amount of money into the game, which pays these guys the money that they get, which is more than rugby league players have ever been paid, and they deserve it. Don't get me
Can I
wrong.
just say, I thought covering the logo was especially the Telstra part of it should have been a no go.
Look,
I don't think it
I
changed
listen to a lot
anything.
of and watch a lot of stuff, not just obviously our own podcast, but I listen to a lot of stuff. And when they start talking RLPA, VNRL,
Yeah,
I switch off now because I'm
yeah,
sick of hearing about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bottom line, yes, payers are played well, and they deserve to be, and the payers are not disputing what the NRL's prepared to pay them. But the reason they're able to pay them that much money is because of the deals that are in place. And if you take away and like they're not talking to the media and so on, there will come a time when these organizations are going to say, well, we're not getting bang for our buck here. If they're not going to talk after games and whatnot, we are not going to pay you as much. That being the NRL. They say that to the NRL, we'll say, well, okay, we're not making as much money, therefore we can't pass on as much money. So it definitely goes both ways. I think the NRL potentially proposing more games for players, it's like an elastic band. If you keep stretching it, it breaks.
Yeah.
And these are human bodies. And they're putting their body on the line. So I'm not in favor of them having to play more games. Look, I'd love the season to go all year. I love watching, but it's not realistic. And you'd have to increase the size of your squad and rotate your players. If you're looking at more games. I think those more games may take into account things like rep football and whatnot. I'm not exactly sure. Bottom line, each side's got to give a bit, and I think that's why it's reached a stumbling block because both sides have dug their heels in, saying this is we're not going to budge anymore. They talk about an independent arbitrator and what negotiate or whatever the case may be. NRL won't do it. They said we've already done it twice. can get us anywhere. Yeah. The bottom line is I like the footy, and I'd rather talk about the footy.
100%. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking
But
about
I think the main thing, just before we finish on there, just to throw my 2 cents worth in without labouring the point, I think what we're sort of trying to get at and trying to see here is that the players are the product, and you have to look after the players' welfare. And I think that's what they want. They want their welfare taken into account, because realistically, they play a lot of games. They play a hell of a lot of games, especially for the type of contact that this sport involves. I don't know. I think they'll be looking at sports like the NFL and saying, they've got a 16-week season, and their bodies can't take too much more of it, and it works out for them. But and we saw a lot of overuse musculoskeletal injuries just after Origin. Ask your Cleary, your Murrays, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think that's true. Just one more thing, boys. 2026 World Cup put back. Looks like it's going to get put back to 2026. Some sort of a reduced format will take place in the Southern Hemisphere. Looks like it might take place looks like it might take place Australia, New Zealand. Was to be in France. Scheduled host. They withdrew in May, of course, saying they couldn't get financial guarantees.
They've done a Dan Andrews, have they?
Yeah, it's so they're looking at winding it back. At this stage, quite interestingly, at this stage, it looks like it might even be reduced to 10 teams with the 8 quarterfinalists from the tournament last year, given guarantee, and then there'll be 2 qualifiers: Australia, Samoa, England, New Zealand, Tonga, Papua New Guinea, Lebanon, and Fiji will automatically qualify, and they'll be joined by 2 qualifiers. They look like the host nation will be revealed. It almost looks certain it will be Australia, New Zealand. The big issue with here is that with the success of the World Cup, it was clearly evident that revamping global series in rugby league was a must. So it looks like there's a long-term plan for the England side, the return of the Ashes for the first time since 2003. So England's coming to Australia in 2025, before Kangaroos have committed to going back there in 2028. New Zealand look like they're going to tour in 2027, with a return in 2030. Like, it looks like there's also going to be a Southern Hemisphere competition that might be in the pipeline, with England keen to create a Northern Hemisphere competition, with maybe having a cricket style approach where when you play, and I suppose what's the football one again? The European football one, the
Europa League.
Nah, the one where they play friendlies and it gets points and whatnot.
Oh, the Nations League.
Nations League, sorry. A Nations League style setup where it showed in the World Cup that really international football would be a good thing for the game. So a Nations League style setup where everything here's in the pipeline. What it actually does say is, interestingly, there's some genuine talk around the longevity of something like the World Cup, and maybe replacing the World Cup with a point style Nations League system where you play over a series of time, you play around the globe and play teams from different countries. I can see pros and cons with both of that, but there's a potential Tri and Four Nation competition for, on the calendar, and England competing against it. I think the big losers in all this at the moment really appear to be America. That Northern Hemisphere football would need to hopefully embrace them and get them into the fold, because they've got a competition which is gaining momentum. We saw for the first time an American native crack it into the Super League. So I hope that regardless of the situation, that those fledgling and you need strong teams for this to be viable. It's already been confirmed that Tonga will tour in England, so it's looking more like that maybe the World Cup might have run out of steam for now, with maybe Australia hosting it in a very reduced format and going from there. And that's my tidbits. So, Griffo, would you like to see a reduced format, or do you think it's probably it was pretty good last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of international rugby league, and the fact that if you want to grow your game, you got to expand.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to get as many nations playing the game as possible. When I heard that there was only going to be 10 teams, I was a little bit disappointed about that. Given that 8 of them are already qualified.
Yeah.
Um,
Not much of a process, is it?
No. Well, obviously they'll need to put something in plan, but to only leave 2 spots, it was a bit disappointing. But it was disappointing when the French pulled the plug. I understand why. They were guaranteed funding, and then the government said no, we can't. Sorry. So it was over, because I mean it would have been great for the game in Europe. And so as it stands, I don't even think France, they weren't one of those 8 teams that you went through. So that's, they may end up qualifying, but it's a sort of a step back, I think, in terms of the ability for the game to grow itself. But there's reasons for it, many of them financial. Ideally, yeah, you'd love I mean, look at the success of the current Women's Football World Cup.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So, rugby league is potentially a global game, but you've got to have the money to back it up. So there's a balance between, it'd be great, have so many teams playing, but yeah, it's got to be financially viable. Obviously there'll be some sort of entry tournaments for those just 2 places. It's just
more games then. There's an implication too.
You know what I'm looking at? One of the largest, and I'm wondering if they're banking on the back of this, one of the largest growing sports globally outside of football, which I'd argue is actually huge to begin with, is cricket. And you wouldn't think so. You'd think, oh, well, cricket's cricket. Cricket's one of the largest growing games globally because of the mini tournaments they have leading into the World Cup. And I'm wondering if they've looked at cricket and thought, geez, you know what? Like, in the Cricket World Cup, the last mini tournament, Holland, which we're happy about, and Sri Lanka made it through. West Indies missed out, and I think it's about trying to generate that. So I'm wondering if that's a little bit of it as well.
Well, we shall see.
Yeah,
It's good that things like the Kangaroo Tour um, is on the way back, and there is a program every year where there will be uh, nations playing nations in some description. So that's a good thing, and it's sort of the program is there. Whereas at one stage we didn't even know what's happening this year. I believe that they're going with a tri-series, Australia, New Zealand, Samoa. I'm not sure that was confirmed, but I think that was the case. And of course, the Tongans are doing a three-test tour of England.
and it's interesting too because if the World Cup does get put back to 2026, as they're saying, the other thing to keep in mind is that the World Cup last year was actually initially supposed to be the 2021 version that was postponed. So you're actually looking at you're almost you're almost feeling like you're not quite, but you're almost skipping a World Cup in there with the gaps.
I mean they called it the 2021, but it was played in 2022, so
yeah,
we're going back
yeah,
to a 4-year rotation in a sense, a real 4-year
yeah,
rotation, which
true,
I think is
yeah.
fair enough. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
well, most major tournaments 4 years I think makes
yeah,
sense. And also too that gives teams the opportunity to build, and who knows where the game's going to be in what's that 3 years time. There could be a lot of changes. The international game's going to keep growing. There's all these
we hope.
implications with we hope, but I think it
But
will.
I think
I
I
feel like
think
it will.
one thing, Graham, is that through the NRL and this Las Vegas
Yep.
thing that's going to, I don't know what I call it a thing, but it's locked in, I think, for 5 years. So I think that's a way to get international interest. And obviously, the US market is the biggest in the world. Um, you just want to tap into it. And that's
Yeah.
all it would be is just tapping in. Not in any way providing a threat to any of the established sports there, but just it was mentioned earlier that the NFL they only play like 16 games or something.
Yeah.
So for most of the year, those guys have got they've got other sports to watch, but you would think that a fan of the NFL would be potentially a fan of rugby league. Um,
Yes. And we've
so
seen in Australia vice versa. Like you even look in
oh,
the last
absolutely,
10 years, the
yeah,
growth of
yeah,
and the popularity, and that's all stemmed too from, there was I remember there being a college game coming out
yeah,
to Sydney, and that was a big deal. Like these are the types of things they got to do, and further to your point there too, Griffo. If say for example you're a Super League fan who's sort of keeping a bit of an eye on the NRL as we sort of keep an eye on the Super League from a distance here, and you hear about this big game in the US, even fans in Europe are going to tune in because it's an event.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think
Absolutely.
you're right.
So that is an avenue for growth.
Yeah.
And when I say growth, it's the expansion of the product, and the expansion of the product can turn into dollars.
Yeah.
You get more dollars in your game grows further, you attract better athletes, and so on. Shano talked about the growth of cricket. A lot of that is to do with the money that's generated through the IPL, essentially. So there's money in the game, and when you got money in the game, and look at again the EPL, which I think is starts this weekend, well, quite soon.
Yeah, what are we, the
So
8th?
somewhere,
I think the 12th of August was the start. Is that this
all
weekend?
right,
That
yeah,
is this
that's this
weekend.
weekend.
Yes. Yep.
So
Yeah, all the European leagues are starting back up.
it's the biggest league, in the world as far as the biggest game goes. And people all over the world tune in
Yep.
to the EPL. So, and I'm not going to say the NRL is going to rival that. Certainly not in my lifetime. But the more eyes you get, and it's largely through, the media, through TV, the bigger the money it generates, therefore the potential to grow your game.
Correct.
And that's, so I applaud the NRL for this attempt to play, not attempt, it's going to happen, to get those teams over to Las Vegas, because the potential for the growth of the game is, it's great. And, I talked about it earlier in the year. I'd like to see a whole round go global. Pie in the sky, maybe, but
Crazier
why
things
not?
have been suggested.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember that idea. That was good.
I think it could work. I mean, anyway, but this is a real starting point. Locked in for 5 years in Las Vegas. I would have been on a plane there if Penrith were going to be going. They're not, so I won't. But yeah, when they do, I got no reason why I wouldn't want to go and be part of that.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. With Vegas, big tourist town, obviously they're looking to, it's just a partnership. You can't see it losing out. You can't see it not spreading the game in some way. And I think it's a positive move, and I think that it's part of. They just have to do it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about managing loads. Having buys for the teams after and things like that, or I think there was talk of a round.
Yeah, they're
or
going to
something.
play, like a 0 round.
Yeah.
Where those 4 teams will play. It'll be, the rest of the teams will play the remainder of the first round on the next weekend. So it gives them that time
Like
to. It's still going to be, a little bit difficult, but it's not impossible.
No.
Given that they will have that time to get back into the country, recuperate, and so on. I think it's great.
And this is how it needs to be sold to the players and the RLPA as an opportunity to create extra sponsorship, create more revenue, which means you're going to get paid more. So
exactly,
that's basically the outcome, hopefully. So that's a bit of a watch this space. So thanks to Shano again for the tidbits. Definitely a lot of insight there. Before we head on,
he's had his ear to the ground for a number of weeks.
I'll tell you what, he's got dirt in his ears. It's been that close to the ground, I reckon.
I'll tell you, it's much better than when he had shit in his mouth from the cow shut in his mouth. Yeah. And someone asked him, what did it taste like? And his answer was the obvious one.
What do you think it tasted like? Oh, gosh. And just when you think it couldn't get any better than that, it's time for Griffo's Grab.
Griffo's Grab!
What else caught your eye?
Oh, look, a lot of things caught my eye. But I'm gonna this week. This man, I had him penciled in earlier in the year for a grab, but something sort of better came up. There were probably maybe some things better came up, but I've been a long time critic of DWZ. When he was at Penrith, he just used to frustrate me because he just makes so many mistakes, and not for want of trying. He gives 100% every week. You can't criticize him for that, but I think he's having his best season, actually, without doubt. He's been fantastic for the Warriors this year. He missed a lot of the early part of the season due to injury, but he's playing his best football of quite a long career. He produced a pass against Titans, I think. Titans.
Yeah, Titans.
Where he ran towards the line. He had 3 players on him, and out of that came the arm with the ball inside to Sean Johnson, who's having a stellar year as well, and he set up that try. It was quite freakish. the ability that he displayed there to be able to get that ball away with literally three guys on him as it was near the line, and drew them all in, and Sean Johnson had no one on him, went over untouched. So yeah, I've got to give it to DWZ. I got to give him credit where it's due. He's the biggest thing for me about him this year is his error rate is much less
Yes.
than it has been, and he's always been able to do some really great things. But for every great thing he did, he'd probably come up with a couple of clangers. So good on him. I've been a harsh critic. I don't take back any of the criticism that I've had, but I do acknowledge and credit where it's due. And as I said, this has been his best year, and yeah, it was an amazing pass that grabbed my eye last week.
Yeah, and like we said before, it's almost as though you put him in a team that's confident and playing well, and just seems everything's clicking for the Warriors. I even mentioned last week. I think we briefly talked about it. I'm pretty confident at this stage, and looking at the games that the Warriors have won and the players that have been involved. I'm pretty confident Sean Johnson, Mike. If he doesn't get the Dally M, he'll be very close. I'm really struggling to think of who might take it off him. And
well, that's if there's a Dally M, Graham.
Well, yeah, if there's no boycott and all that
boycotting
sort of stuff,
moment,
but
But yeah,
who
he's
knows?
been outstanding.
Put a bit of tape over it or something. But yeah, I think that it could very well be his opportunity to win this. And yeah, he's been phenomenal. DWZ's been phenomenal. The Warriors have been phenomenal. They're a team that I think people are going to have to really keep an eye on as we head to the finals, because they're another team that can pull it out on their day. Still have that concern whether they can do it a few weeks in a row. But,
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll see how we go. But yeah, another great result for the Warriors and DWZ in that game. So yeah, they just keep rolling. The Warriors sitting in third. I like their draw, as we said, top four bound, if you ask me. All right, well, we might as well get into this week's footy. As I said, there's some big games and some big implications for these games, as always. I did say at the top there, I said, you might want to think about it for your joker. That doesn't mean that they're all going to be easy games to pick, but I just get a feeling that the people that are waiting for that week might look closely at this week. So it'd be worth listening out for the 2-minute tip, see what the boys think. So let's kick off our preview for the 2-minute tip. Round 24. I know I say it every week. I do. I can't believe we're that far in. Round 20. Is it round 24 this week? Yes.
No.
Had to double check there. Unbelievable. First game will happen on Thursday night. The Manly Seagulls at home at Brookvale, Four Pines Park, as it's now known. They'll be hosting the Penrith Panthers. Sean Kepi's back for their Seagulls this week. Matt Lodge, he'll be out for the rest of the year with that knee injury. Ben Trbojevic is into the starting side. For the Panthers, still no Isaac Tango this week. I don't even think he's in the squad at all.
No.
We talked a lot about him last week being in the reserves.
It's all a bit of a mystery, Graham. We don't even know what the actual injury is. There's been no talk about it at all. Like,
all we know is that it's a leg. That's all they're saying,
that's
really,
all we
isn't
know.
it?
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
Could be an FC. We don't know. There's been no. Normally, like you look on those various sites and they give you, injuries and whatnot. I've not seen anything. But anyway.
Yeah, so they've got the same 17. So Zach Hosking playing in the centres again, holding that spot there after what I'm sure you'll comment on in a moment was a impressive performance last week against the Storm. Just for those wondering, I know that people would have heard a bit about Jerome Luai this week. He was charged with a grade 1 careless high tackles. So just a fine for Jerome Luai. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit later about some other players who weren't as lucky as Jerome and ended up on the sideline. But Jerome Luai will line up this one after just getting a fine. Seagulls last week, I think a lot of people around the water cooler on after the weekend's footy, or after, I suppose, Thursday night, it would have been Friday morning. We're talking about the Seagulls lost last week, and that basically, a lot of people now are putting the line through them. They come up against the toughest team they could possibly come up against this week, Griffo, in your Penrith Panthers, who last week, while the Storm were down on troops, despite that, it was just a dominant performance.
Yeah, it was. I want to mention something just in relation to Penrith. Like their defense in the last 2 weeks, they've played two teams that were in the top 8, both of which have been in the top 4 in recent times, in the Sharks and the Melbourne Storm, and they conceded just one try in those 2 games in total. So that's a pretty good effort, I think. They were, it was just a dominant performance again last week. Again, they didn't, get the scoreboard attendant, it didn't raise his or her heart rate too much, because they didn't hit 30 again. It was just, they just dominated the game. They didn't show completely what they've got, but they did enough to win and win by 20 points or something like that.
Yeah.
Against the Melbourne Storm. Now, to take into account the Storm were missing Jerome Hughes and Xavier Coates from when we did our preview, thinking that was probably going to be a close game, but they were pretty big losses for the Storm. But realistically, they did lead the game early. The Storm, they got their try, but after Penrith scored their try, it just never looked like it was going to be anything other than a Panthers win. Manly come in with a team that is somewhat down on what they might think their best team is. Particularly, they've had a problem up front with injuries. Obviously, Turbo's not been there for a while. I'm just going to tip Penrith. I just think Manly might struggle to score points. You mentioned Zach Hosking. He did some good things, but it didn't seem natural for him in the centres. Like, I think he got a couple of try assists from his passes to Brian Totler, but there were a few passes that didn't quite. It didn't look natural for him to be passing to the winger, let's say. He's a good player, Hosking. But I think the forwards from Penrith, they've dominated a few packs over the last few weeks, so it might be a tough one for Manly, but they've got some good players there if they fire. And realistically, if Manly go down here, their season really is over. And it'll be the end of their season if they do. But I'm going to stick with Penrith, Graham.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think that Penrith will win this. I think Penrith will do, what Penrith do. They'll just grind and suffocate. And I think the Seagulls we saw last week, they just, I don't know. There's just something not there. It's they're the type of team though that that can throw a good performance together every now and then. So you can't fully write them off. But I think with the way that Penrith is playing and just the way they really grind teams and suffocate them, you'd have to tip Penrith. And I'd imagine, Shano, you'd be thinking that Penrith would be pretty hot in this one.
I can't. What can you add to that comprehensive synopsis of the game. Guys, just want to say, just read here, it seems it's breaking news. Wade Graham is going to retire at season's end.
Oh,
So, ex-Penrith player.
Oh, wow.
Just read it then, hanging the boots up after 16 years. What a champion. And,
yeah, Wes.
absolute. Last player playing from that premiership winning Sharks team. Absolute champion of our game. But look, we'll talk probably a bit more about him and his role in the Sharks game. And congratulations to him on his career, by the way. I think it's
Fantastic.
outstanding career.
I was before we came on when I was getting my dinner and whatnot. I was tuned into a Footy Talk podcast on. It's like a Triple M thing. He was on there with Aaron Woods and talking a bit about his career. I didn't finish watching. I don't know whether he announced his retirement there, but he was talking about the fact that he played his 250th game for the Sharks last weekend, and he played 42 for the Panthers. So, if he's retiring, unless the Sharks sort of go to the grand final, he's not going to make that 300.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, he's had a great career. I remember watching him at Penrith. He came through. He made his debut at 17 or something like that. He was a schoolboy star. I was really impressed with. He was a half back then, and he was talking about how the sort of his salary cap sort of squeezed him out of Penrith. He didn't want to go. He was quite heartbroken, but he came through with a lot of guys like Lachlan Coote, Sam McKendry, one or two others, Tim Grant, and they couldn't. They were all on junior sort of contracts, and then. Sorry, I've gone into another 2 minutes.
That's so nice.
But he. I remember talking to him after one of the games, one of those games where they let the crowd on the field after the game. He was a really, really nice guy. I was really upset when he left. I think they had Luke Walsh and Travis Burns who were playing 6 and 7 at the time, and he's, with respect to those guys, a much, much better player. Even though those guys, they were seasoned first graders, but he did suffer a bad injury before he was let go by the club, which was unfortunate because I think he's forged a brilliant career for New South Wales, Australia, and obviously part of that, an integral part of the Sharks' one and only premiership victory. So good luck to him in his retirement. I'm sure he will be in the media quite extensively because he's great knowledge of the game and he's a great communicator.
Yeah, definitely. And you see that when he comes on, they often have him on 360 and things like that. So I think for him, he's been not only a great player skill-wise, but I think he's also been a good ambassador for the game. And even through those periods where he played for the Indigenous All-Stars, obviously a proud Indigenous man, represented New South Wales, Australia, premiership under his belt. So yeah, he's done it. He's done just about everything, and it's amazing too because he has been around for so long. He's only, like you said, started early. He's 32. So by the time he retires, I think later this year he'll be turning 33. So still got a lot of his life ahead of him. So good on him, Wade Graham, and all the best because real champion,
Absolutely.
Ambassador for the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Second game of the week. Funny enough, we'll see the Sharks take on the Titans 6 p.m. on Friday. So knowing that Wade Graham is retiring, obviously these Sharks home games here at PointsBet Stadium are going to be even more special, starting with this one against the Titans Friday night. Team news. Last week, the Sharks were without Mulatalo. So I think it was a jaw injury. Hiroti did come in, so he'll...
He did well too, Hiroti.
Yeah, he did. He was, he was really good for the Sharks. It was a really inspired Sharks team last week. They were much better than they have been in previous weeks. Calhoun also back on the bench. For the Titans, Big Tino back on deck after his suspension. Fodawaker out due to suspension, so it's a bit of a swap there. Still no AJ Brimson. Something to keep in mind there. Isaac Liu on the bench. Tino's brother Isaac, 18th man. And as we've heard through the media, Verrills obviously out for the rest of the year. He's had surgery, so the Titans here.
What was that, Graham? Sorry, I didn't realise he was injured.
Yeah,
What
did you not hear about that?
No.
That is shoulder. They sent him for shoulder surgery, so they're reporting that this week. So Sam Verrills is actually going to be out.
That guy.
Yeah, he's going to be out for the rest of the year because the club's
insane,
basically
isn't it?
decided now, season's gone, go have the clean out now so that he's actually back on deck for the pre-season rather than going through the season and being out for the pre-season.
They were, from what I heard, they said if he has the clean out now, he's basically full contact January.
That's a really smart move from the club.
Yeah, isn't it?
I think he's a really good player.
Yeah, it's just.
And this season's gone really. So,
it just seems he'd do an ankle ligament tripping over a chip packet.
Yeah, his career's been interrupted badly by injuries, but really talented guy.
Yeah, so we won't see him for the rest of the year. So I actually think it's not a bad move. It's good timing. The Sharks, they'll be they'll be very confident after last week's win coming up against the Titans team who, as we said, don't have a lot to play for. They're out of contention here, and the Sharks looking to cement that spot in the top 8 because, as we know, Griffo, there's the difference between a win and loss in this competition could be, a couple of points in the 8 or, a couple of positions out of the 8.
Absolutely. I want to pay tribute to the Titans last week for the way they showed some defensive grit. It's something that we don't associate with them. They played most of that game with just 12 players and pushed the Warriors. I watched all the first half, listened to a bit on the radio because I was on my way to the Penrith game, which was the 8 o'clock game. But they got back to 18 all, and then the Warriors got a couple of late tries. But it was a good performance from the Titans without Tino, and then obviously without Mo Fotuaika. But if they can show that sort of effort in defense, they're a big chance of winning this game, because we know they've got the attacking flair through the likes of Campbell, Khan Pereira, Brian Kelly. You've got Fafita, who's just he is top class, and Kieran Foran directing him has made a big difference to his career. Much more consistent. So they're a chance. In saying that, I will have to tip the Sharks because what they did last week is going to give them some confidence. They were lacking in confidence. I'd written them off, basically. I thought they were going to drop out of the 8. I did not expect them to win last week. But you think that level of confidence, playing at home, the odds, you'd have to think are with the Sharks, but it would not surprise me at all if the Titans, we know they can score points. If they can show the defensive grit, they're every chance of winning. A good game this one looms as. Shano.
Yeah, I agree. I think I fully agree with you, Griffo. I think this is actually going to be I think this is actually going to be a good game. I thought the Sharks really last week, it was a bit of a walk in the park for them against South Sydney. I don't think they were tested in many ways. I think that they're able to get away with everything they need to get away with. All their cards they played, South had no answer for. I don't know if this is going to be the same this week. I think this week might be slightly different, and I'm looking forward to it. I've got the Sharks winning, but I think this is the week where the Sharks need to say, right, we got South Sydney last week. Um, this is the week where we just need to put the foot on the throat of a team and really just make it our own. And I think this is it. I look on the back of everything you said, Griffo. I've got the Sharks.
Yeah, I think the Sharks in this one. Like I mentioned before, it's one of those things where I think they'll get a bit of confidence. But yeah, the Titans yet again, they're one of those teams where when you think they're not going to get the win, they come back and snap one. But I don't know, I just feel like the Sharks, they got a bit of confidence from last week, got a lot to play for. They're at home. It's all sort of lining up with the Sharks, so I think they might be the safer bet in this one. Belter on Friday night. This game's going to happen at the Gabba, with the Brisbane Broncos are taking on the Parramatta Eels, who are really fighting for their life to stay alive in this NRL competition. It's like a finals game early for them, and it's really like that throughout the rest of the year. For the Brisbane side, massive news for them. Their skipper Adam Reynolds is back in. So is Hetherington. He'll be back in as well. Ricky also in the 17. He was 18th man last week, coming back from an injury. So some good news for them. For the Eels, Arcee joins the side in the centres, with Simonson shifting to the wing. Miller Stevens dropping out. I think it was his first game last week, so he's doing a bit of the hokey pokey. He's in, then he's out. Brendan Hands recalled to the bench. I think we talked a little bit last week about the hooking situation there, Griffo. So they've got all hands back on deck for this one. But Brisbane, I'll be honest with you, Griffo, because last week we did our preview, tipped the Broncos, all was right in the world. I heard a couple of days later, after the tips had been submitted, that Adam Reynolds was out, and I was almost thinking, oh geez, like really, the tips were booked. I was actually thinking, geez, should I change? Would I have changed and all this sort of stuff? And I actually thought that would have been enough to put it in the Cowboys' favour. But it says a lot about where Brisbane's at, where their halfback and skipper and Adam Reynolds, who we've said has pretty much been the centre of their attack, was out, and it was business as usual. And I also find it interesting. I'll be interested to see if you wanted to comment on this. Last week we actually called out Ezra Mam and saying, like, didn't call him out, but we actually acknowledged the impact he's having. And that was evident more so on the weekend as well. So this Brisbane Broncos team's looking at as a really well-rounded squad at the moment and flying high.
Oh, absolutely, Graham. They didn't miss a beat. Without their captain there, I thought young Jock Madden probably had his best game in first grade. Credit to him. But this is a side that's got probably attacking ability as good as, if not better than, any other team in the NRL. Huge amount of speed in this side. Skill. They got big, strong pack of forwards. It's hard to see them being beaten in this game, or indeed too many other games. They're a better side than they were earlier in the year. They're playing with more confidence. This is really, the window is open for this team. They are going to lose a couple of players next year with Flegler and Farnworth, who I rate highly, both of them, going to the Dolphins. They're still going to be really strong, but I think, they're really a massive threat to Penrith for the premiership. The Para side, still, you look through it, and yeah, there's some good players there, but I just don't think they're going to be able to match it with the Broncos. They got over the top of the Dragons last week, and I've got to say, I thought they were a little bit lucky to do so with a controversial non-strip, according to the referees, where the Dragons were under the posts. Gutherson played at the ball, and somehow the referee said he was trying to make a tackle. I thought that was nonsense. But to their credit, they went on and they were behind and won the game. But you can't compare the Dragons to the Broncos. I just think it's going to be a pretty heavy loss actually for the Eels, unless they can really, each member of that 17 plays at their absolute best. And I still think the Broncos have got to be off their game for Power to win. It's Broncos, Shano.
No, the Broncos winning. What I loved last week about the Broncos was that, they didn't have Adam Reynolds, and they played this perfect game, which we don't see it from them often, just purely due to the scheduling. They played this perfect game of dry weather football. They played daytime football that we don't see too often because they get nighttime football so often. I thought they were brilliant last week. It just seemed like their players become intoxicating. Like, I think what Adam Reynolds has done for this team is he's got them playing this attacking game of football that's very reminiscent of his last 2 years at South Sydney, where it's play to the strengths, find the people on the field that can attack, and when your attack is so good, you find that that's your defense. And I think that's what they've done, is they've been able to defend through attack, and they're doing it in just such a wonderful way. Parramatta, on the other hand, I thought they were sketchy at best last week. Really, they have to win if they want to get on 28 points. Try and keep up with the 8. Try and keep teams like the Cowboys at bay. They have to win this week. This for them is so much wins. When you consider that the Cowboys have a bye, South Sydney, we'll talk about them in a minute, but for the Eels, this is much win. I actually think this is going to be a bridge too far for the Eels away from home at the Gabba. I think Brisbane's going to win this, and I think in the end they might actually do it quite comfortably.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Brisbane in this one, for all those reasons, as I said, that not only Adam Reynolds being back, but just the impact Ezra Mam had last week. We talked about him a little bit last week on the podcast. I've talked about how much I like their centre pairing. Their forward pack with Haas and Flegler going forward and Carrigan then through the middle. Like that, Flegler, Haas, Carrigan, those three through the middle. Like, you have 3 hit-ups in a row from those guys. That's the best go-forward game possibly in the NRL. They're a real contender, and with, Reece Walsh popping up here and there, I think the structure of having Reynolds back and the opportunity for Walsh just to pitch in where needed just suits them to a T. So I think they're going to have a really good day out, and I think they're going to win this one. Okay, moving on to the first games of Super Saturday. Get ready for it, folks. You ready, Shane? Have you had the Strepsil and the glass of water?
I'm just pouring it now.
Well, look, you got a couple of minutes because I'll go through the teams and then we'll hear from Griffo. Rabbitohs taking on the Dragons. This is a South Sydney home game, 3:00 p.m. on Saturday at Barlow Park in Cairns. So it should be a nice, sunny, warm day for the Rabbitohs and Dragons to go toe-to-toe. A few changes for the Rabbitohs side, first of all. The most notable would be Thomas Burgess. The only way he plays again this season is if South Sydney make the finals. He got a 3-game suspension for his careless high tackle against the Sharks. Shaq Mitchell coming straight into the first grade side and into starting prop. Bit of a watch this space with Jai Arrow. He came off the field the other night with back spasms. I saw some media with him today where he said it's feeling a bit tight, but he's confident he will play. Another straight swap. Michael Cheekham out of the side. He'll be playing reserve grade this week with Jacob Host coming back into the team. And Tane Milne, whilst he was named last week on the wing, he was actually 18th man and young Tyrone Munro came in. This week, Milne is named to play. So if they're 1-17, effectively Munro's been dropped out of the side in favour of Milne. I think I've got them all there. Yes, Totola's still out, as we can see. Francis Molo out. He had Category 1 symptoms in that head clash against the Eels. So we've got Michael Molo, his brother, coming into the front row. Murdoch Wasilla, new lock. Sully's back on deck. He missed the Eels game with a calf injury. Zach Lomax out of this one, as to is Jack Bird. So Lomax and Bird, probably the most notable names out of the Dragons side here. I'm going to go to Griffo first.
I think we should go to Shano.
All right.
I'm donating my 2 minutes to Shano.
Okay. Right.
There will be a buzzer in 2 minutes, but I'm sure it will be ignored.
Part of me, it's funny. I was thinking about this game. There is a part of me that says I could rant, but what's the point? It's just last week. It was just the most demoralising thing I've ever seen. I followed South Sydney my whole life. I marched up and down the streets. And when I saw what was delivered last week by a team that all intents and purposes 4 months ago were premiership favourites, they were kidding themselves. They've dumped this young kid on the wing who made 3 mistakes. If you're telling me he was the reason why South Sydney lost, you've got another thing coming. He was the reason why South Sydney actually had half a chance. We've got Tallis Duncan, who, dead set, has just finished his bloody HSC by the looks of him, coming on and doing more than what the freaking captain's doing. This is the problem with South Sydney. They come up, they stand up, they then go out in the field and they think because they're wearing red and green, because they can tap the bunny, because they can, they're part of this elite club that's been around since 1908, that the sea's going to part and the try line's going to appear. They were kidding themselves last week. I have not seen. What annoyed me about last week's performance wasn't that South Sydney lost. I've seen them lose. I've seen them win 3 games all season. South Sydney losing does not bother me. What I saw last week was an apathetic performance by elite players chugging on a truckload of our salary cap that relied on these young kids getting paid peanuts to come in and win the game. They were kidding themselves. And I'm telling you now, I've said it before, if Demetrio wants to make these young kids the scapegoat and say that it was Munro's fault, he can go down to Redfern, sit at Redfern Oval and have a chat with everyone that turns up because he's kidding himself just as much as the players on the field are. That was rubbish last week. I felt sick after watching that game. I've met 2 South Sydney fans, big South Sydney fans on Monday, and I talking about the football. I had a rage in me that I could not contain. And the reason why I couldn't contain it is because we've got these young kids who come on the field and who give their all. We're now saying that they're our saviors. Have a look at our cap and the money that's been absolutely pumped into it by certain players. I'm telling you now, unless your name was Tallis Duncan, look, I feel for Munro because he had a red hot go last week. He dropped a bit of ball. He dropped 3. He went for an intercept and dropped it. He got thrown 4 crap house passes before then. I will say this. I thought Alex Johnson, he was pretty good. Campbell Graham had a go as well. Jai Arrow got injured. But far out, there was a majority of players who were well and truly behind what there should be. And I'll say this. If I have to go to Lachlan Ilias's house and draw a white line on the ground and say, mate, can you kick it this side? Because that was dead set, not a penalty. That was South Sydney got lucky. That should have been out in the full and a Cronulla tapped the ball. Anyone complains about the refereeing with South Sydney on the weekend, I'll show them that moment in time and say that is not a penalty. That was lucky. It was out in the full. How about this, mate? Kick it inside. Do what Adam Reynolds did. Stay behind every training session for an hour. You might do it. I don't know. But far out. Just give us something to go off. Because I'm telling you now, you know what? I'm tipping South Sydney this week. And you know what? They're my joker. And I'll say it for this reason. Because if South Sydney don't win this week, and if South Sydney don't put the Dragons to the sword this week, their season's over. So this is it. South Sydney win. They'll win by the biggest margin this week, because if they don't, it's season over. If they scratch a win against the Dragons, or worse still, they lose, because we've seen that happen before, their season 2023 has gone down the gurgler. And I'll tell you now, if the whole club, from ball boy to CEO, don't have a serious look at themselves, they are kidding, because this will be the method and this will be the outcome for the next 4 years. I was pretty tame, I thought.
What are your thoughts on the Dragons?
We're shit. If we don't beat them, we're at all sorts. Look at Lomax bird out. Like Lomax Mallow bird. There's a reason why they're $7. But it's this.
Yeah, Sharks were 4 something last week.
They have a sense of entitlement at the moment, South Sydney. They've got this sense of entitlement at the moment.
I think Gus Gould called them lazy. And I don't know if I disagree. Gus Gould, I think it was on the show, whatever that one is.
Lazy.
Footy, called them lazy. I don't know if I disagree with that. It's probably not a bad...
I would...
Apathetic's probably not bad. That
they
wasn't
were apathetic. They were apathetic the other night. That's what...
Shit.
You know what? I don't earn $300,000 a year. What's a base wage of a rugby league player? Now,
base, as in minimum.
Minimum's about 120, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Right, so I'm
more than what we're getting.
So they're getting more than us, and yet I'm paying my membership every year to watch. You know what? And this is no disrespect to the Tigers. If I went for the Tigers, and I see what the Tigers produce sometimes, I go, look who's on the field. There are the people on the field for this red and green team are some of the best in 2 decades. Wake up to yourselves and start playing football. The football that the fans deserve you to play. For I swear.
All right.
Again. All right, and 2 minutes starts now. What do you reckon, Griffo?
Yeah, I've got no emotion. Obviously, for you guys, emotion is attached. And Shano's an emotional guy. and rightly so. He loves this team, and uh, as you do, Graham. Um,
Correct.
but for mine, um, and you know, I'm a Panthers supporter, obviously. I think there are two dangers to Penrith winning the comp. Number one is the Broncos, and still number two is the Rabbitohs. Um, they're still
Why I
in the
love you,
top
Rick.
eight.
Why I love you.
No, no, look, as I say, I got no
No,
emotion
no.
in
Yeah.
terms of, like I look at things, from a Penrith's perspective, and I think we've got every other team, pretty much covered. Um, but South Sydney with the potential that's there, and I guess that's a word. Um, they potentially pose a threat to Penrith and winning a third title in a row. We've seen them earlier in the year play at their best in that game where they come from behind, and not too many teams do that. Come from behind and win against the Panthers. So that's the potential this team has. They do have an issue up front, obviously, with their Totola being injured and Tom
Burgess.
Burgess suspended. That's a problem for them because I think a front row of Jai Arrow and Shaq Mitchell is, with respect to those guys, it's not a winning, it's not a premiership winning front row, certainly. Um, there's plenty of talent there, and I think they will bounce back this week. And Dragons, I thought played well last week, and really, I thought they were unlucky to go down to Parramatta, but it's hard to see with the losses to this team. As you mentioned earlier, Bird, Lomax, Francis Molo, hard to see them testing the Rabbitohs. Um, if Souths don't win this game and win well, then I guess there really is some issues. But there are issues there, but this is a game they win, Graham.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting them to win this one. I think the team changes and what they're looking at too, especially with Tane Milne coming in on the wing. I think for South Sydney, a lot of their focus will be based around defence. It's been the biggest issue for the last couple of months. They leak a lot of points, and this is where I'm concerned here. I know that we're expecting them to be able to score a lot of points against the Dragons, but I really think they need to tighten it up and stop leaking the amount of points they do because they can't stop letting in 4, 5, 6 tries a game and expect to win. I think that's the biggest thing. So I think the move of Tane Milne coming in is actually, I mean, they did score a couple of tries down our right edge. I think they're looking to try and tidy up that defence and also get a bit more of a roll on early on in the sets. That's the logic possibly behind it. Whether I agree with it or not, it's a different story, but that's the logic I can try to attach to it. And the other concern I've really got, I can see this being one of those games that South Sydney, I mean, I know, Shane, you're talking about it. They have to win with their joker and that. I'm worried that even if they win, I'm worried this is going to be one of those games they win 36-30 because of the way they're defending at the moment. I think for South Sydney to show that they're serious about this, not only in addition to what you guys said about winning well, but this is the type of thing where they need to win to single digits. That to me, whether it's 18-0 or 36-6,
No.
if that against columns in single digits, I think that's a success for me because that's where South Sydney have been so good in previous years and they've let themselves down this year.
Graham, you know what I think the problem is for me? I actually gave South Sydney an excuse. Maybe that's why I'm a bit salty. I said the reason why we've leaked lots of points is no one can actually organise our defensive line like Latrell Mitchell. That Latrell Mitchell gets our defensive line set. He's so vocal on the field. He gets the players to stand where they should play. He gets everything set. And last week, it just proved me so wrong. It was like nothing was organised. It's like it's just like some defensive players. Colin Matangi, he
He had
the
his
poor
worst game
guy,
for South last
he
week.
was horrible.
He was awful.
And I don't like saying that about football players,
No.
but you know what? If tell me another word I can use to describe the way he played the other night. And it's just like this. What more did you need?
Yeah.
This game, that win last week would have thrown you right on the doorstep of the fourth, with a buy in hand, with your for and against looking sweet. What more incentive did you need? Because you know what? You got to walk before you crawl. You got to crawl before you walk. You can't just walk and run. These are the steps that you take to win a premiership, to get in a grand final, hell, to play a game before the grand final, because that's what we usually do. And it was like last week, it was just like, nah, sorry. And I think that, they're just teams are just finding very, very simple ways through South Sydney. And the easiest way to get through South Sydney, they'll concede a penalty. They'll concede a six again.
Yeah.
At first, I was salty at the refs. I can't be salty at the refs anymore because
No,
I'm now
even Demetrio said
I'm
that.
seeing us turn players over. I'm seeing people flop on the player. I'm seeing them just hold down forever, and it's just like, stop. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Anyway, South, and they're all the reasons why South Sydney will win.
They're all the reasons.
Oh, they have to turn around. Anyway, this game here, it's Tigers' home game. I just had to look then. It's in Hamilton with the Warriors.
One of their
being the
many
away
home
team.
grounds.
Yes. I've been everywhere, man. So the Tigers technically the home team here. Taking on the Warriors that we've talked a lot about. Big Stefano and Sean Bloor both back in. Both back in the side here for the Tigers. Staines is out with a hamstring injury. Junior Tupu shifts to the wing. Kapoa back to the centres. 12 back to the bench. So a bit of a shuffle around there. No chance this week. No Nickel Clockstaff for the Warriors. I'd be interested to see, Griffo, what your thoughts are on that. Headnock is the only player out. I'll go to you first of all because we have been talking about how good he has been. We've talked about earlier in Griffo's grab the impact and the great season that Watini Lesniak's had, and I've also mentioned earlier in the podcast, I think if the Dally M's go ahead that Sean Johnston will win. It's all looking as though it's thumbs up for the Warriors at the moment, isn't it?
Oh, look, I do expect the Warriors will win this game, but I'd give the Tigers some hope. I was really, I was impressed by what they did last week. I thought they were unlucky again. There was some forward passes. I think 2 forward passes leading to tries. That it's tough. When you're a team that's struggling as they have been most of the year, to go down to Canberra, they could have had those 2 points. I think with a few things, maybe a slightly different rulings and whatnot. When they, as you say, there was no Stefano, no Sean Bloor. So credit to them. Brooks has made a difference since he's come back. They look dangerous in defence. Arpey continues to do some really good things, but they are coming up against the third best team currently on the ladder in the NRL, and they're taking their home game to New Zealand to play the New Zealand Warriors. And I don't think that's a winning formula. I've talked about the Rabbitohs and the fact that they're on the road. I think I mentioned it more last week, but I don't understand the most important thing in the NRL is to get 2 points on a weekend. Yes, money is a factor and whatnot, but the more you get 2 points, you sort of make your money if you're premiers and whatnot. I think that's the best way to do it. So taking a home game to another country, yeah, maybe they're going to make some money out of it. But to me, they're not going to win the game. But I do expect they'll go well. I like what they've done, recently, Shane.
Yeah. It's oh, yeah, it's one of those things with the Tigers, isn't it? Look, the Warriors are going to win. I'm just trying to find a way to try and look at the silver lining for the Tigers and see what they've done over the last few weeks. And they've been in games. I think Brooks's kicking game really has at times helped them and saved them. The key thing is they're just playing this side this week. It's just on fire. You say it, Griff, and I really agree. There are teams in this competition who know how to win, and you've said it for years, whether it be us on around the water cooler or on this podcast. You've said the top four sides who know how to win, they're the dangerous ones. And when I look at the Warriors are now know how to win. They're just losing just isn't in their vocabulary. And I just think that whatever the Tigers have and whatever the Tigers can throw at them is just purely going to be nullified. It's it's like throwing rocks against people who have grenades. It's not going to work. I think the Tigers are going to be in it for about 40, 50 minutes, and they're going to play okay football for 50 minutes, but the Warriors are just for 30 minutes going to play all over them. I've got the Warriors in this one quite easily.
Yeah, I think the Warriors will have a pretty good day out in this one. They're playing some good football. Tigers sort of sticking games, but I think the Warriors will get this one for those reasons that you guys outlined. Moving on to our next game. This one will be the 7:30 game on Super Saturday. Allianz Stadium will host a Rugby League game. We haven't had a game at Allianz for a couple of weeks with the World Cup games happening. The Roosters hosting the Dolphins. Dylan Napa coming in for the suspended Nathan Brown. So Nathan Brown, obviously, after being sent off last week, that's pretty much the only change to the squad. Dylan Napa. It's been a long time since he's played football.
For the Roosters especially.
Yeah. I think his last game would have been for the Dogs, wouldn't it? And we're probably looking at... I don't
Did
think
he go
played
to
it.
France after the Dogs?
Yeah.
Or did he come back from France?
Yeah, I don't think he... Well, he wouldn't have played NRL last year. I think 2001 was the last NRL appearance. It was for the Bulldogs.
21.
So, yeah. So there you go. So that's a few years ago. Anyway, he's back in for the Roosters. So we got to see Dylan Napa on the field for the Roosters. 30 years old now. For the Dolphins, Ray Stone coming back from a broken hand he suffered against the Panthers. He'll be on the bench. Herman SASA to 18th man. Nicarima at fullback. So his rotation through the back line continues. He's back to fullback where he's played a bit of footy this year. The Hammer back in the centres. Maybe even a possibility of a bit of a switcheroo there with the Hammer playing at the back. So keep an eye on that one. This is an interesting one, guys. Last week I didn't tip the Roosters, and it wasn't the only one that buggered my tips, but it definitely put me one behind everyone else. The Roosters we mentioned, Griffo, just in touch still with the top 8. They'll be looking for a big win here. And I'm not going to say they've hit form, but I think you'll know what I'm talking about here when I say they've shown some more promise and had some better performances in recent weeks.
Yeah, they sort of dominated Manly. I only watched the first half. It was a ordinary game. I switched it off at half time, didn't put it back on. I think Manly came back a little bit, but the Roosters, they were pretty good. They started the year against the Dolphins and went down, and quite a shock, obviously, to a lot of people because it was a shock to me. But generally speaking, if you're going to play the Roosters, you probably want to play them in round one because they don't win round one all that much. They usually come back, but this year it hasn't quite happened. In saying all that, and I do fully expect that they will beat the Dolphins, and I think they'll actually win quite well. It puts them in a position really where they can still make the 8. And mention this at the start of the show. I think they'll win. I think they'll win well. That back line looks pretty good. Tedesco, Tupu, Smith. Smith was good last week. Manu, Suwali's back to form. Kiri, Hutchinson. So they had the young man Sandon Smith who comes now as a 14, but Hutchinson did a pretty good job last week. Forward pack doesn't look bad either. I just think they're going to be too strong. I think Radley was playing in the second row last week or the week before, but he's back to his normal position of 13. The Dolphins, they were in the top 8 at various stages of the year. I think they've sort of hit bottom 4, which is where most people predicted they would end up. I don't see them turning it around this week. Roosters all the way, Shane.
Yep. Yeah, I think the Roosters have just, I think the Roosters, they're just going to have too much. They've got too much class across the paddock. When I look at the Dolphins are this really strange team at the moment where all that momentum and all that sort of drive they had at the start of the year, it's like the Bowsers run dry, and now they're just relying on football. Jermaine Osako, look, I think in some ways, who would have thought I'm talking about a winger being the key to a match? But I think he is. I think he's the guy. If he can, if he can get early ball, get himself over the line, they're playing. Look, if ever the Dolphins want to beat the Roosters at this stage in the competition, at the back end where we always see the Roosters just flash home, this is the time. But I just look at the Roosters team and I just think there's just far too much class across the field. I think we're going to see good games from people like Brandon Smith, Tedesco, any team with Tedesco in it. I think Manu. I just think the Roosters have just got too much firepower.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Roosters are building, and I think the Dolphins are fading. I think that, it's done well, the Dolphins, but it's just been, I think, hard for them to sustain it. And I think they're getting to the end of the season, what's been a big season and a tough, grueling season for them. And it's almost as though the Roosters are just starting to find a bit of form. So I'm going to go East in this one. On Saturday night. On Sunday, first game of Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. takes us to Amy Park in Melbourne, where the Storm will host the Raiders. Big clash here. It's 4th versus 5th, guys. So some big implications for not only the top 8, but possibly the top 4. The Storm were missing a couple of key players last week in Jerome Hughes and Xavier Coates. They're both back on deck. Raymond Smith is amongst the reserves, so keep an eye on that. For those who are wondering when he might be back, he may not be too far away. We're also seeing Bronson Garlick, so the one son of a former Rugby League player, take the place of another son of a former Rugby League player in Tyron Wishart. He's going back to the reserves there. So Bronson Garlick in, Wishart out. The Raiders. So here we go. Griffo, we talked about this last week. Ethan Strange. He's going to make his debut in the centres.
Wow.
Yeah,
I like it.
I was just having a look, trying to find the for whatever reason on my thing here, I can't see the team, but he's in it. He's named in the centres, number 3 here.
Yeah, you have Graham. You got Strange, moving to the centres, Hopewadi on the wing, and Rapana to full back because it looks like that Bastion Chris could be out. He's out for an extended period. He had that hammy iced up last week, and all reports say he could actually be long odds for finals.
Right.
That's big for them.
Yeah, so
Rapana did play one last week.
I think the club's saying 3 to 4 matches, but Ethan Strange, we talked a lot about him last week, Griffo.
I like the NRL physio. The NRL physio says he's long odds.
Okay, so the Ethan Strange, we talked about him last week. We talked about the impact he had in the under-19s, and that it'd be a matter of time before he's in this side. We didn't actually expect it to only be a week, but
No.
he's in for the Raiders, and I think he'll be one to watch this week to see how he copes with the NRL, especially coming up against a team the likes of the Storm.
Yeah, look, it really it's an important game. This is fair chance the winner of this goes on to take that 4th spot, and the loser probably will end up 5th. I did see the Storm last week, and they were outplayed by Penrith. Penrith really kept Cam Munster quiet. He was not a factor at all in the game. Likewise, Harry Grant didn't have much impact either. They welcomed back, as Graham mentioned, Xavier Coates and Jerome Hughes. They're playing. They're back at home in Melbourne. Traditionally, Canberra's always been a bit of a bogey side for the Storm, and they could cause them some problems. But I really think Canberra have overachieved to be where they are. They're a side that, again, they don't, when they win, and they usually do win, they don't win by much. But when they lose, they've been pumped several times. I think the latter scenario is more likely, and I'm definitely tipping the Melbourne Storm to bounce back from their sort of lackluster performance last week, and I think the Storm win and will probably go on and make the top 4. Shane.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is going to be a cracking match. I think the Storm will win this game. I just look at the Storm. I just think they're a bit more clinical in those key areas. I think with Munster in the side, incidentally, reports that Jerome Hughes, whilst named at halfback, maybe not. I still don't think it matters. I think they've just got these key players in key positions at the moment, and surprise, surprise, we're talking about the Storm in the top 4. I think that this will tell us. Look, I think the Storm are going to win. This will tell us where the Raiders are at. If the Raiders, and let's face it, how many times I remember a great weekend at Wollongong where we saw the Storm Raiders, us 3 together, and just absolutely phenomenal match. How many phenomenal matches have these guys had? This is one where the Raiders can significantly say we're here by putting one on. I don't think they'll get there. I think it's the Storm for me.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. This is it's an interesting one too, because it says a lot about about the season and where the teams are at, and it's a really confusing year because we do have fourth versus fifth, and you talked about there, Griffo, about the Raiders overachieving. I know that the betting odds aren't the be all end all, but I think it says a lot when the team coming fifth in the Premiership with 4 rounds to go is paying $91 to win the Premiership. Like, do you know what I mean? It's almost like
I know what you mean. Yeah.
we're acknowledging that they're fifth, but they're no chance of winning the Premiership. We've also got a team in at sixth currently, the Sharks paying $76. The Knights are paying $76, and as you alluded to before, they're not holding off on the they are holding off on the Rabbitohs, I should say, at $7.50 there, but it just sort of gives an indication that the Storm are still one of these teams that punters, bookies, fans, whoever you are, they believe that the Melbourne Storm can still win this premiership, and they're not giving the Raiders much chance. That's where this to me isn't a fourth versus fifth game. I think the Raiders, we've talked about their draw, we've talked about a number of things impacting their season and their position on the ladder, and they've had some poor outings. Last week when they played against the Tigers, I mean, yeah, they just got home. There was a lot of times during that game where we thought the Tigers might get them. The week before, we don't have to go back very far. The week before against the Knights, I actually thought they were really poor. So the Storm at home are a different beast. They're hard to beat, and I just don't know if the Raiders have that quality, and I feel like their position on the ladder is inflated. So I'm going to go with the Storm as well. This will be our last game of the round. We've got the Newcastle Knights hosting the Canterbury Bulldogs. Bradman Best has an adductor injury, so that's the best way to describe that's the inner thigh. Tuala comes in. Jacob Saifidi's been named, even though he got a hamstring injury against the Dolphins. Brother Daniel's in the reserves, so keep an eye on that as well. Obviously, they'd like to have as many Saifidis in the Knights side as possible, but obviously big loss there. Bradman Best. Luke Thompson playing his first NRL game of the season for the Bulldogs. He's going to replace Edwards on the bench. From what I can see, that's the only change to the Bulldogs team, who we have to go back to before last week because had the bye last week, and before that was that win against the Dolphins, that tight game at Bundaberg. So, for Thompson, I think the injury was in the preseason. It was a foot injury, and then he's played...
Liz Frank, was it?
It could have been. I'm not too sure, to be honest with you, but usually with the foot, that's usually the more common of injuries. I'd say it would be, considering how long he's been out for. I think he's played maybe 1 or 2 games in reserve grade coming back through. So, good to see Luke Thompson back in the side and playing top flight football, Griffo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he's on big cash, so a lot of their salary cap this year with likes of Luke Thompson, Kickow, with extended injuries, so it's made it a bit hard for this team. But on paper, they're actually starting to look like a bit of a decent side. They actually do look all right on paper. But I still think Newcastle, it's too important. These guys have put themselves in with not just a chance of making the 8, but sort of an expectation of making the 8. And they can't afford to lose against the Bulldogs. They were pushed last week, I think, over in Perth against the Dolphins, who put up a good show. I did expect the Knights would win that game quite easily, but didn't turn out that way. But they got the job done, and I think they get the job done again here. I think this Bulldog side does look pretty good on paper. I think it's Knights in a narrow one. You look at the Knights having Kalen Ponga and the Bulldogs not having a guy of that talent. He's the best guy out there, and he'll lead his team to victory. Shane. Oh, Graham.
Sorry, no,
Yeah,
bad.
mate.
I just realised I was on mute. Sorry. Yeah. It's one of those things where I look at the Knights and I just see what the Knights have done. They're another team that just know how to win at the moment. Kalen Ponga doing really good things. Bradman Best out big. The Dogs, wow. The team that just seem to know how to zig when they should zag at the moment. The Dogs are brilliant at building pressure for 10 to 15 minutes and then just doing something exceptionally ridiculous. The Knights, on the other hand, they look like a winning football team. They look like a team that know what they're doing, a team that look very organised, that look, you spoke about them earlier, Griffo, and gave them the kudos that really for what they've done in the last few weeks, they should be applauded. And I actually like them here. I think that they're going to win well. I think they're starting to get the systems and processes that allow them to be a top 8 team. I like the Knights.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think the Knights in this one too. They've really turned a corner. I feel over throughout the course of the season, they're a team that we sort of didn't have on our radar, and now all of a sudden there was just that passion. I think that big win they had, which was against the Bulldogs, where they put, was it 66-0 that day?
Yeah, something like that. One of those outrageous scores that happened around that time of the year. There were a few of those big scores.
Yeah, it was actually the game against them. So it was almost that was the game where since that we've seen the Knights as this top 8 team and this team of contenders. And I actually think at home, and with the momentum they've got, I'm really keen on them. So I think the Knights as well in this one. So I think that will round out a week where all 3 of us agree on all the tips, fellas.
Wow. I don't think that's ever happened before.
I don't know, yeah.
Would have,
yeah, it's not very common, and this is why I'm thinking possible Joker Joker round for people.
Yeah, could be. I haven't pressed that button yet. But maybe this week. I'm just gonna put it out there. I think I'm gonna go for the Roosters for
I
the
was
margin
thinking them
this
for the
week.
margin. Yeah, I was actually thinking them too. I seriously was. I've been trying to pick different to you because in our competition with the margin, you're the person to beat. So if I pick the same as you, that's no fun. I can't beat you. But I don't know if that helped me much last week.
I haven't done those yet. Normally I've got them done by this day, but
Shano, you reckon
I'll do 'em
South?
tomorrow.
I reckon Penrith will be pretty popular this week for the biggest margin.
Possible, but one of the reasons I'm not going to go with Penrith there for that is they've just been content to strangle rather than get
Go on with it.
get the sword out and really chop the team to pieces on the scoreboard. They're just happy to strangle them. I think that might be the case this week.
Do you know who I'm going to go for my margin? And people might think it's a bit silly considering it's 4th versus 5th. I reckon if the Storm wind up and get a couple of tries in, if Hughes plays and the Storm run a few tries in, they could really go on with that game. So I'm going to go Melbourne Storm for me as the biggest margin of the week.
The Raiders have copped some hammerings when they've lost.
Yeah, and that's where you sort of got to look at those things because I know that even like Shane said, he talked about the South game. South leak a lot of points. St George have lost a lot of games by small margins, but I think South might be another team that if they actually do perform to their potential could put on a score. Yeah, I think the Storm in that one, but Look, the other thing we've been talking about recently on the podcast, fellas, is the NRL W, the Women's Premiership. We're heading into round 4, and we're also seeing too here, some teams. We talked about it the other week. We talked about the Tigers, but the Titans, they're 3 from 3 at the moment. They're flying high on top of the table. And keep in mind for this one, guys, it is a top 4 system with the current top 4, the Titans, Knights, Roosters, Tigers. We were just waiting, Griffo, for the Roosters to hit back, and they did last week. They had a big win. Broncos also got a big win over the Cowboys. We saw narrow wins to the Titans. Pretty convincing win for the Knights, and the Raiders gave the West Tigers their first loss of the year, scoring 5 tries to 4. So we've seen a lot of points scored over the past few weeks. This week's games, guys, we've got the Dragons hosting the Raiders, Cowboys hosting, I think that's a game in Brisbane. It's a doubleheader with the Broncos game. So the Cowboys hosting the Tigers, Broncos, Eels, Sharks, Roosters, Knights, Titans. So some intriguing matches this week. Just wondering, thoughts first of all, Griffo, on the games this week, and what stands out, and from what you've seen, who you think might be the teams to get the jobs done.
Raiders have been really impressive. It was a good game. I saw most of the game. They played the Tigers last week, who were previously unbeaten Tigers, but convincing winners. The Raiders, they led early. Tigers came back, and then the Raiders kicked ahead again. They're a very solid forward pack, Canberra. I think they'll be too good for the Dragons.
Have you had a look at the Tigers team just quickly, Griffo?
I did.
I know you're going to get
just played last week.
I was going to say she's named this week, and she got on the field last week, so it's good to see Jess getting involved.
I saw a bit of it when she came on. I happened to be actually watching that game in preference to the whatever the NRL game was at the time, because it was quite close, and then Canberra sort of dominated and I switched over to the NRL game. But I'm pretty confident the Raiders take this one out. And Graham, Shane, what are you thinking?
Yeah. I'm thinking the same way with you. I think it's going to be a good game. I actually think this is a really, really good, really good round of women's football this week. I think this is going to be one of the pivotal rounds. We're going to see maybe some teams come to the surface. I think we're going to. We might see certain sides try and assert their dominance. I think this is going to be one of the pivotal rounds for me. I said it earlier. I think that there's some key matchups this week, probably culminating at McDonald Jones, 1v2. See what happens there, and the Sharks Roosters game. What really comes through there. The Broncos for me, very interesting. We spoke about this at the start of their season. What's going to happen to the Broncos? I just think that there's some really, really important games this week, and when you look at the ladder and when you look at the games, I think there's some really pivotal matchups. There'll be some pivotal moments in this game as well. I think this is going to be a really, really big week for women's rugby league. Look, for what it's worth, I'm sort of new competition. I'm really afraid to give my tips because my tipping this year has been horrible. But for me, I think the Raiders will be too strong for the Dragons. I think the Tigers will be too strong for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree there. And Tigers on that one.
Yep, I've got Tigers. Broncos, Eels. I'm actually tipping the Eels.
Oh,
It's a big
Yep,
one.
I'm
Shane,
tipping the Eels.
wow.
I think
why?
this. I just look at good
They've been
question.
poor.
They've been poor. No,
Yeah.
I just look at I just look at them and I think that I think that I think that the outs for the Broncos. I think that when I look at I think the people like Abby Church. I think they're just there's something about it. I don't know why Zali Faye. I think there's something about Rachel Pearson playing in halfback.
Yeah, that's a
I just
big
think there's
game. She
something about this
hasn't
team
played
that's going
yet.
to click for me. I just looked at I've looked
They
at
do
the
have a
Eels.
few players coming in, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've looked at this team and
Yeah.
been disappointed.
Kelsey Albert.
Yeah, and I've looked at this team and been disappointed, and I just think that this might be the week where they click.
And
You
Charrington
know,
won't be there,
No, she's
obviously.
Sherrington's listed at
no,
30. She's
Yeah, she
gone.
won't be
she's
there.
gone.
She's missing for
She's
4 weeks.
gone. I just think that maybe,
Be a
and
big
there's
turnaround.
but there's a small part of me that said it's now or never for them too. If they don't click this week, if they don't do
With
what
how
they
short
need,
the season is, they're really starting to
Yeah.
have to.
this is it.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
it
you're
for them.
right.
There
I
was
just
a
think,
miracle that happened last year
yeah, and you know
when
what?
they made the grand final.
There's
Um,
but there's also a part of me that why I'm picking them is that I can't set. Although the Eels haven't been great, and I think the ins for the Eels are going to help them with some key outs, mind you. I can't set my watch by the Broncos either. And I think that really sometimes it comes down to the fact that you've got a few key ins now, and you have to win. That's why I've got them. It's an upset. I said it earlier. I think
oh, is this an upset? Yeah, you
it'd
could be
be
right, Shane. You could be a genius.
it'd be
I think the
upset.
Broncos are going to pump them.
Look, I probably in another parallel universe would pick the Broncos as my margin in this one.
Yeah.
But I just think that my tipping hasn't gone great this year, and that's fine. I just think that maybe this is something out of left field. Who knows? We'll find out next week.
They were back last week, the Broncos, weren't they? I mean, they lost their first couple of games, and then
they were.
they pumped the Cowboys. The points were flowing, but
I think they're not the side they've lost.
Nah,
two of the absolute best. Well, three actually. Tamika Upton, arguably the best women's rugby league player in the world.
She for me is the Cameron Smith of rugby league. Women's rugby league.
Yeah, she's the 5'8" Taryn Aiken, who was outstanding last week for the Roosters. She's a gun. They lost her, and it's a couple of years ago now, but they lost one of the best, if not the best, prop forward in the game in Millie Boyle. So this side is nothing like the Broncos sides when I think they won the first three competitions. They still got obviously talent, led by Ali Brigginshaw, but they did bounce back last week. The centre, Hufanga, I think she scored a large number of tries. She's a very hard player to tackle, and I think Para's had a few problems in defence. She could pose some more problems, but Shano, you might be a genius.
I just had this feeling. I don't. Look, to be fair, Para's being pumped, but I just look at who's coming back in, and in this competition, you mentioned it just then, Griffo. In last week's game, Hafungo, she scored in the 27th, 37th, and 40th minute. Sometimes it just takes an individual, aside from the one she scored in the 6th. It sometimes just takes a group of people to come back to change it. That's what this competition's like. And I just think that when I look at the people coming back for para, in my mind, this is more closely to the team that they were hoping to field. And I think that if they can just if they look, they've got to consolidate and play this week. If they don't play this week, they're done. And I've got no other I've got no other thing around me to say that nothing. I just think that they've got to win this week. They've got to the key people have to step up, and if they don't, well, that's it. Eels done. They'll finish last.
Tell you what, if you want to talk about the other end of the ladder, the Roosters, they've got to be the favourites to win this thing. We talked about a bit of a hiccup the week, well, not last week, the week before, where they lost to the Raiders, but they were back in some good form last week, pumping the Dragons. Yeah, I reckon both of you boys would be pretty keen on them beating the Sharks. It's not that the Sharks are a bad team, but I just think, geez, this Roosters team, they're something else.
They're big.
The squad.
They're powerful. There's some speed there. There's a lot of skill there. I can't see anything but a Roosters win. The Sharks have got some good players. I haven't really seen too much of the Sharks. But this Roosters team, it's a who's who of women's rugby league, really. Too strong. I mean, they're missing Amber Hall. She's out for the season. And another prop, his name Moana Hill or something like that. But the girls that have come in, almost as big, and they're just powerhouses. They're a machine. And I can't see anyone beating them. But obviously, we've seen the Raiders beat them down in Canberra. I thought they'd go through undefeated. Maybe that was a bit of a wake-up call that they needed. And I just think they're too strong for the Sharks, Shane.
Yeah, I think the same. I think a couple of weeks ago where the Sharks lost 10-0 to the Tigers, and it wasn't the fact that it was a low-scoring game. Tigers. It was the fact that they couldn't score. They couldn't buy a try against the Tigers that game. They then sort of came back last week, 10-8 against the Titans. They looked better. I actually thought the Titans were frag off their game. But the Roosters are just
got beat on the bell, I think.
Yeah, the Roosters are just insane.
Yeah.
It's just such a good team. The hiccup, you're right. You're right about the hiccup. And I think with the Roosters, I think there's certain sides in this competition that can actually take it to the Roosters. The Sharks aren't one of them. At the start of the year when I did my sort of going through the sides, I had the Sharks in at 8th, that they're in at 7th at the moment. I think the Roosters will have a very comprehensive win at the wonderful time of 12:03 on Sunday.
Yeah. We had a chat about that last week. You can't kick off at midday. No.
There must be a reason for it, but I just don't understand it.
Expect the Roosters to win, but there's still some quality in this Sharks team. I think this will be a good game if you're going to watch a game. I mean, at 12:30 on Sunday, there's no other. At 12:03, I should say. Sorry, I had a bit of a moment then. 12:03 on Sunday. There's no other NRL. It's a good lead-in, worth watching. We talked obviously about the Stars and the Roosters, but there's some great players also running out for the Sharks. Penatani. They've also got Tonegato's there. We talked about Quincy Dodd. There's some real talent in both teams, but
Can I just say they've got an in Jada Taylor. another
Yep.
player.
Yeah, she's the fullback, isn't she?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so some talent across the park. Should be a good game, but you'd think the Roosters might dominate. And then,
Their forward pack, the Roosters forward pack, like that is the forward pack of the competition.
yeah.
Powerful.
It's insane how cool.
And as I
It's
said,
not about size, or it's not, the skill of that forward pack is just immense.
Amber Hall, it was a big signing for him. Out for the season, but
Yeah.
they're still formidable.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do they have a salary cap for the women's NRLW? Or?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Because
It's not
if
something
they
I'm aware
do,
of.
the sombrero is well and truly
yeah.
back in vogue.
They're
I think
keeping
the
the
female
stereotype
sombrero
alive.
might actually be double the size of the male sombrero if there's a salary cap. I don't know how they'll fit them under.
Yeah.
Can I also player who I think if they get a bit of game time, very interesting to see. Jordan Burton, number 14 for the Roosters. I think she debuted in 2001, played a few games, massive raps in other leagues, in other female rugby league circles. I think if she wants a breakout season, this could be it.
Yeah.
What position, Shane?
14. Number 14 for the Roosters.
Yeah, but what position does she play?
She plays. She generally plays in the second row.
Okay.
But definitely someone who it was when she made she's from the Central Coast. Made her she plays through the middle third. She's a bit of a utility, but I think she's just right for the second row position. I think she's going to be. She's got a bit of pace to burn. Everything coming out of the Central Coast. I read about her 2 years ago when she was a 21-year-old. It sounded like she was going to be one of the next big things. She's made a couple of appearances. I think she's now of the age and sort of experience that will allow her to really come through. I think this could be a year for her.
The last game of the round here, this would be a belter.
I think it's going to be a cracking game.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking forward to this game. I
It's
think
a
it's
shame that the Knights-Titans game is going head-to-head at the same time as the Storm Raiders game on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Which is unfortunate for... Anyway, I'm not going to go down the whole...
You can't schedule that. Yeah, given there's so many games, when you combine the two leagues, it's impossible really to have them all at different times. So, but this is a big game. Unbeaten the Titans still, are they?
Yeah, they're unbeaten. You see, for me, anyway, I mean, I'm of the other opinion. You see, the scheduling for the NRLW confuses me because, we say, I don't know if it impacts on where they're playing and this, that, and the other. Last week we had a Thursday night game, which I really thought was good as a lead into the Thursday night footy. Yep. There's no Thursday night game this week. Anyway, I wouldn't mind seeing more, if there was an early Thursday and early Friday night game. I know it's a bit more complicated than that. You got to have stadiums and this and that and the other, and they're doing double headers and so on and so forth. But the popular 12:03 time slot was already taken, so they're playing at 1:50. But the Knights and Titans in this one, I almost feel as though, fellas, I'm going to go as far to say, I know we've talked about Brisbane being there or thereabouts. We'll know a bit by Sunday how they go against the Eels because there's a bit of pressure on there, as Shano said. But the Knights and Titans have both been impressive so far this year. This could be an early indicator as to which possible team is going to stand up and join the likes of the Roosters and even the Broncos as another contender, because based on form and how the season's been going, behind the Roosters, I know the Titans are winning, but we know that the Roosters are that fabulous team on paper. These are probably the two best teams behind them that people would have up there as contenders based on the form this year.
Absolutely. I'm a little surprised that the Gold Coast are in the position they are, but they're actually, you look at them, they're a good side. And they welcome back a couple of players this week. Jamie Chapman, who's a Blues origin player, and I think the other one's Emily Bass, another well-credentialed player.
Yeah.
I do think the Newcastle Knights will win. They're listed as the home team. I'm not sure. No, it's at McDonald Jones. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's. I'm assuming before the Newcastle Knights men's team play. So, you'd think they're going to maybe some are going to get there early and watch this game. They deserve a good crowd because this is two really good teams. I just think this Newcastle team, who are the reigning premiers. And yes, they did lose some quality players, but they still look really strong. Led by, as I said, what I consider quite possibly the best player in the competition in Tamika Upton. She's got amazing hands, a wonderful ball runner, and a really smart rugby league player, and likewise, Jesse Southwell, wonderful hands, can throw the long ball, great kicking game, strong forward pack. When you've got the likes of Romanuk and Taylor Predeborn coming off the bench, that's a lot of power. I like this side, and they've got the English woman Georgia Roach playing 5'8". She, I think, played her first game. Might have been in the centres last week. I'm not sure about that, but they look good. I'm going with them, Shane.
Yeah, I'm going with the Newcastle Knights. I think for me, I think it's the Southwell sisters. Hannah Southwell had that ACL injury, which kept her out. I just think that when you look at what you're 100% correct with Jessie, and I think Hannah's going to get back to her scintillating form. You put that in with Upton, who's an absolute class act. I really think that they have. I really just think they have all the strings to their bow in this side. I suppose to talk about the Titans and where I think the Titans might see some value or try and get through the Newcastle Knights. I think for me, the person for them will be Georgia Hale. Georgia Hale, their lock. She just runs and tackles. She plays an absolutely phenomenal game. I think, she when she was signed away from it, she was a marquee signing. I just think that she could, if she can just get everything happening in the middle and tighten up the middle in defence and give Lauren Brown a bit of help, help those in the middle. I honestly think that maybe there just might be enough room for this Titans team. But I just look at the Knights and think Southwell sisters, Upton. You're talking about some phenomenal players. Not to mention, I think the Knights are a pretty complete 1-17. So I've got the Knights winning this one in a cracker game.
Yeah, it's a tough one to pick, isn't it? I mean, Titans just keep keep surprising, don't they? But yeah, I mean, like we said, Knights. I think it's hard with this competition, like you guys have been saying. We tend to sort of gravitate sometimes to the players we're familiar with, and there's so many familiar players for mine in that Knights team that I know can get the job done. So yeah, this one's a bit of a flip of the coin because I didn't actually expect the Titans to be as dominant as they have been so far. So should be a belter of a game, but I reckon you could just about flip a coin with that one. But I'm with you guys. There's so many players in that Knights team that that we are familiar with getting the job done. So that should be a belter. I'm thinking that could be game of the week in the NRLW. But there's a couple of, I think that also that Roosters Sharks game also too definitely is worth watching. But yeah, they're all worth watching. It's great entertainment. There's been some really good football, and I think that this season so far for mine, I know it's only been a couple of weeks in, I think it's been the best one so far, and I think it just shows, fellas, that each season we're going to get better and better, and look, who knows, imagine where this competition's going to be in 10, 15 years' time.
I agree with you, Gray. I think the hallmark of the competition is when you start looking at, if you can look at the two sides, you can start looking at matchups. Like I'm looking at this Knights Titans game, and I think the centre matchups are going to be absolutely pivotal. And when you can start saying that, okay, I'm looking at the matchups between centres or fullbacks or wingers, or and that's taking nothing away from Yasmin Strange on Emily Bass. I think we're starting to see some real skill in this competition, and the NRL copped a lot of flack by drip feeding teams into this competition. I think it's paying dividends, and I think when you can start saying, okay, it would be awesome to see some key matchups. That's when you've got a healthy competition.
Yep, no, it's definitely a healthy competition. NRLW is healthy. The NRL, it's a healthy competition too. We've got so many big matchups this week, and implications for, as we said, top 4, top 8. Probably a lot of people all eyes on Penrith tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Thursday. I'm used to doing the Wednesday podcast. Thursday to see how they go. We've got the Sharks looking to continue their run. The Eels looking to keep their season alive. The Rabbitohs have a point to prove and bounce back. The Warriors wanting to make sure that they show everyone they're the real deal. The Roosters will still think they're a chance of making the 8. The Storm looking to make the 4, and the Knights really looking to cement their spot in the top 8. And the teams on the other side of all that have something to prove. Cowboys this week, we haven't mentioned, have the bye, so I think they'll be really looking forward to gaining the 2 points without having to break a sweat.
Actually, a little tidbit I heard at the start of the season, and I think I'm right. So the second rower for Newcastle, Kia, she's playing this week. I think I heard this on the radio. She was like some world discus champion.
Right.
And I think that's what's cool about this competition is that you've got athletes join that. Yeah, I think when we look at women's rugby league, these guys are athletes. That make no bones about it. They are friggin' awesome.
She ranked number 1 in the world when she was 16 in discus.
Wow. Okay, there you go. And when you couple this with the men's competition, I think rugby league is just on the up. I think it's so good to watch.
There you go.
Well, I guess, it's getting blanket sort of exposure. Like 9 play all the games, or may not be on the main channel, but they're all available. Fox plays some.
You can watch them.
You can get all the highlights or watch full game replays on 9. So
it's accessible.
It's great exposure, and with that exposure, obviously, the message is getting out there to women who are, or even younger women who are, sort of somewhat sporting inclined, and you can see it as, oh wow, I can actually forge a bit of a career in this sport. and that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Great
And we're
thing.
seeing.
Some of them are, full-time professionals. Obviously not most of them, but that will come as the game continues to grow and generate more revenue. So good luck to me. It's been a rapid rise in this particular competition.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's great to see, as we always advocate for here, the promotion and building of the women's sports, and you look even, the success of the Women's World Cup at the moment. As we're podcasting this, I've been keeping an eye on the France-Morocco game in the background, and everyone's really talking about that and getting into it, and it just shows where, with some resourcing, some funding, obviously that's part of the resourcing, but and some exposure and everyone getting on board, just how the game can build, and that's something we're really looking forward to with the NRLW. I think that just about does it, guys. We've got it all covered this week. Should be a massive week of footy. Good luck with your teams. Good luck with your tips. And it's a bit scary that we all agreed. So we're bound to get one wrong at least amongst us. But it just shows that we're feeling as though we're getting towards the end of the season and starting to get a gauge of how the teams are going. But yeah, really looking forward to the end of the year as we head towards the finals.
Thanks, listeners, and
Thank you, everyone.
enjoy round whatever it is, 24, and round 4 of the NRLW, and we'll be back next week.
See you guys.
Cheers, man.